Episode 47 of the History of Aviation podcast is brought to you by Shinecraft, aircraft, automotive, and watercraft mobile detailing. Serving the East Tennessee area, 865-337-1408.
History of Aviation podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.
Hello and welcome to the History of Aviation podcast. I'm Derrick Beeler, and as always, I'm joined by Mr. David Rowe and Dave Gorman. How you guys?
Hey, what's happening?
Oh, doing great here.
Good to see everybody. Having a good week, I hope.
So
Definitely.
far, so good. Weather's not being nice for the aviation part of my life, but, that's part of things you have to deal with.
It's sometimes the price we pay for having a pretty gentle March. Weather-wise, April came in to remind us that, it's not done with us yet. Had a lot of clouds in the sky and all that rain, and I still look at the radar to see what I'm missing and hope I'm not missing much,
Well, as a matter of fact, I walked outside today and listened to one fly over. It was a Hercules, and nothing I could do. Just listen and go back in.
Oh, well, but you tried. You were there. You were ready.
I had the camera in hand, but didn't get to see it. So
breaking through the clouds.
Although, let's hope the clouds clear out by Monday. That's kind of important.
Yeah, this episode 47, David Rowe. It's 47, and we're doing something different. What are we calling this one?
It's the Axis and Allies top aces of World War II.
Goodness gracious. Now, there were an awful lot of aces. Remember, an ace is a guy that shoots down, 5 planes?
Well, 5 is the accepted norm now. It was more for earlier. I believe it was upwards of 7. And that's one of the interesting things about this is every country had a different definition of an ace to begin with before it kind of settled on the number 5.
Well, we're not going to review every single ace, just our top aces. We don't have time for that. And as we talked a little bit off air, there's some names that we need some time to practice with, and we need to limit ourselves with some of those names, right?
Yeah, very much so. There is some interesting pronunciations that you're about to hear. So just prepare yourselves.
One of the things I've always enjoyed when you see sometimes their videos, documentaries, interviews with old pilots, they sit down no matter where they're from. Astronauts were the same way. Russian and American astronauts, they get together. They just start talking. All of a sudden, they're moving their hands. They're showing different things with their hands, how planes maneuver. And they all have these things in common, the ability to fly, to fight, to respond. So it doesn't really matter sometimes, what country they were flying for in terms of the skill and the connection and the investment in time and effort. What is fascinating about this, they all have in common great eyesight, great reflexes, opportunities, and that willingness. And sometimes they had no choice with some of the machines they had. These guys flew and were successful in a pretty wide variety of aircraft around the world, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got some Finnish pilots that flew Brewster Buffaloes, which
they flew what?
Brewster Buffaloes, which
the heck is that?
Exactly. It looks a little bit like a Wildcat. It was a very underperforming aircraft. The American pilots did not care for it. It was exported out of the country and was used with really good success by the Finnish Air Force. So they didn't have P-51s. They had to use Buffaloes.
Well, that's what they had, and they found a way to adapt and survive, and they had more than just a single ace in them, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. There are multiples in almost every country that participated in World War II. It was interesting, looking at the list and going, well, we're going to focus on the top ace, but there's all these names that you recognize going down the list.
Well, and that's the thing. Our listeners who are more central thinking about American aces, there's some names that we know that we hear about that had maybe good press agents or whatever, or they had a good story, but those weren't always necessarily the top aces. So some of the people who you might expect to hear about were fine pilots and successful as warriors, but they weren't at the top. So we're going to focus and keep this on looking at the top of the list, right?
Yes, correct. One of the things I wanted to point out was a really interesting thing is a long-standing trend in warfare that statistically approximately 5% of combat pilots account for the majority of air-to-air victories. So the guys that we're talking about are in an elite group. 5% of them are making the majority of air-to-air kills. So these are the best of the best, and they show it with the numbers of aircraft they were able to take out of the sky.
Well, you don't get that many opportunities unless you're flying an incredible amount. And I think when you look at the number of missions that some of these pilots flew during World War II, they had lots of opportunities, but I mean, they were also exposed to hostile fire, anti-aircraft, mechanical issues, weather, all kinds of things. So it was a high risk situation. In fact, do we have any aces that we're going to profile who did not survive the war?
Yes, there are a couple of them in here. There's a Marseille of the Luftwaffe in particular. We'll get to him. He died jumping out of an airplane. So there's several.
So it was a cutthroat business, of course, and we respect the piloting. We respect the abilities, the machines, and so we'll pay tribute to some aces. Did you have an idea where you wanted to start?
Well, let's start with the Allies, I guess, since we are our allies. We'll start there. The highest scoring aces for the Allies were actually Soviet pilots. And that was an interesting thing. You would, think that it would be, American or maybe the British, but no, it's the Soviet pilots that they spent a lot of time flying and fighting the Germans. And from what I read, it was really hard on the Russians to begin with. They took a lot of beatings, and then as the war progressed, they got better and better and started putting up some really big numbers. The top ace for the Russians is a gentleman by the name of Ivan Kozhedub. He's credited with 66 victories. He flew 330 sorties and engaged in 120 dogfights, flying the LA-5 and the LA-7. He's actually Lavochkin. Yeah. He's one of the few pilots that shot down a Me-262 jet, and he was the first Soviet pilot that actually did that. So, he's pretty spent a lot of time in the air and was pretty successful at it.
And, I mentioned earlier just about weather conditions and temperatures and some of the primitive aircraft they were flying and some of the primitive airfields they were landing at. The services, everything was really challenging. And as you mentioned, as many missions as this guy flew, there probably were plenty that were scrubbed. Equipment wasn't available, fuel wasn't available, ammunition perhaps, things like that. But he stuck it out. And I don't know if you have a list of the other aircraft he shot down. You mentioned that 262. What a feather in his cap! Obviously, getting one of those, probably a surprise to the 262 pilot as well that happened. I mean, the Lavochkin was not exactly a fast plane. It was a stout plane, but he certainly, he maybe extended beyond his capabilities to reach out and take that thing out. But
to shoot down a 262, you either had to catch it taking off or landing, because when it was, in combat in the sky, you're not going to catch it. You had to catch it as it was slowing down and turning to land, or as it was coming up, taking off. And I think he got it on a landing as it was coming in.
It still counts. And you're right. The vulnerability at that time, because it had to slow down quite a bit to be able to have a controlled landing.
Correct.
And pilots waiting for that kind of thing. That was no doubt a big thrill for him.
Yeah. And Ivan was a hero of the Soviet Union on 3 occasions. So he earned that honor in February, August 44, and then August of 45. Says he preferred short, intense attacks to stun and bring down enemy aircraft. So, he liked the short, quick attack and get out.
Well, I think we find that kind of thing is consistent with our pilots, that there were things that they were trained to do, things that they learned to do, things that they tried to do, and those were tactics that worked well, that they'd studied, they'd reviewed, they'd trained for. And, the short, quick attack, obviously, Ivan capitalized on it. Did you say 66 kills?
He had 66 kills. There was another gentleman, an Alexander Prikorshin, who had 65 victories, who was one behind him. He was the highest scoring pilot to ever fly an American aircraft. He flew the Lend-Lease Bell 39 Airacobra. So he was flying an American aircraft when he was getting his kills.
Wow, the P-39. We provided an awful lot of those to Russia. They needed them, and we were kind of struggling a little bit with how that plane was going to get used. They loved that cannon in the nose, didn't they?
Absolutely. They the difference is the Soviets and the Germans fought low, a lot of ground attack type missions. So they weren't doing high altitude escort missions like the 51s and the 47s were doing. So yes, the P-39 was in its element, low, fast, heavy armament, and the Russians, they absolutely loved it.
Well, he was a good one to start with, but I know we have a few more to get through, and we're already running into some time here. So, who you got next?
Let's go to the RAF, to Mr. Johnnie Johnson, who was the highest scoring pilot for the Western Allies against the German Luftwaffe. He had 38 kills or 34 kills. One of the things that you'll hear is couple of numbers for the top, because there seems to be some disagreement over which, how many. Was it ground attack? Was it only in the air? So I've got him as 38 kills and as 34 kills. He flew 700 sorties and engaged enemy aircraft on 57 occasions. Most of those were Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I've always had the perception that a lot of those type of fighter duels took place over the continent. Did Johnny, and I mean, of course there were Luftwaffe fighters that came across and engaged somewhat over England, but did Johnny have any kills over England, or were those all over the continent?
Well, interestingly, he broke his collarbone playing soccer or football, and he did not fly during the Battle of Britain because it caused him pain because of this broken collarbone. He had to have surgery to surgically repair the collarbone, and once he got that fixed, I've got a list here. He flew in the Dieppe raid, combined bomber offensives, the Battle of Normandy, Operation Market Garden, Battle of the Bulge, and the Allied invasion of Germany. So while he didn't fight over Britain, he fought all the way into Germany.
Now, he seemed to have a favorite aircraft that he plucked about 20 of the Focke-Wulf 190s out of the air, didn't he?
He sure did. He apparently figured them out.
Yeah, I guess those guys were tired of seeing him coming up behind them.
Yeah, you better believe it. He was pretty good in that Spitfire. So
yeah, classic British aircraft and a high scoring ace.
Yes, absolutely.
And he survived the war, and he survived the war, lived to 85 years old, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Several of these guys lived long lives. So it's interesting to just hear about their later exploits. But we're just covering World War II here. So let's move on to the United States Army Air Force. Gabby Gabreski 28 kills in the air and 3 on the ground. One of only 7 U.S. combat pilots to become an ace in 2 different wars, which I thought was interesting. Another thing that was interesting, he apparently was a mediocre trainee and was forced to pass an elimination check ride during his primary training to continue. So he didn't start out as a excellent pilot, but he certainly became one in the end.
Well, that just goes to show that with proper training and maybe some attitude adjustments, you could overcome a rocky start. He certainly was where we needed him to be.
Absolutely. He flew. So he was at Pearl Harbor. He apparently flew in a P-36 in an attempt to attack the Japanese, but they had already left. He flew in the RAF with the Polish. He has of Polish background, so he flew with the Poles in the RAF, and then he switched back to the U.S. Air Force, and he had over 300 hours of combat time. And unfortunately for him, he made the mistake of saying, well, I want to fly one more time. And on that last time, he made a strafing run on a Heinkel AT-111, and his propellers struck the ground, and he crash landed and was captured and finished the war in a Luftwaffe Stalag Luft 1. So, yeah. That one more time is bit him. He was ready to go home, and he thought, I'm going to get one more in. So
now I've always associated him most closely with the P-47, the Thunderbolt.
Yeah, the 56th Fighter Group. He was the leader of that group for the time before he crashed. Yes.
Goodness gracious. Well, he was lucky about that. I know I read somewhere where he had some close calls, but before he drug a prop on the ground there, he got shot up a few times, and that was a powerful airplane. It had to feel great to be flying it, but you still had to take care of it.
Absolutely. Well, just think about it. He's strafing a plane so close to the ground that he scrubs his propellers on it. So, I mean, he's 4 feet off the ground. That's some pretty big, to fly that low and shoot at something.
Big time.
So what was his total, you said, total kills?
28 aircraft.
28 aircraft. That's
166 combat sorties.
It seems like a pretty good batting average to me.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, we've talked about the Soviets. They're 66. The Johnnie Johnson RAF in the United States, Gabreski, 38 and 28. So these are all big numbers. When we get to the Axis, we're really going to see some big numbers.
That's coming up, isn't it? Now,
yes.
Gabreski, just to be clear, he flew for the United States Army Air Forces.
Correct.
So he was not a Navy pilot. He was the Army Air Force pilot for the U.S. at that time.
Right. And interestingly, when the next one I'm going to talk about is Richard Bong, who happens to be the United States top ace. I always considered him a Navy pilot for some reason, but he was an Army Air Corps pilot as well. I guess because he flew in the Pacific, you just automatically assume he's a Navy pilot, but he is not. He's an Army
island
Corps
hopping,
pilot.
all that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's talk about Bong here.
The top American fighter ace with 40 kills. He shot them all with his Lockheed P-38 Lightning. So he didn't hop around in different aircraft. He pretty much stayed in the one. Apparently he considered himself a poor gunnery. His accuracy wasn't very good. So he compensated by getting as close to his targets as possible to make sure he could hit them. And apparently in some cases, the debris from the planes he was shooting down damaged his aircraft. And so he apparently liked to get up close and personal with his victims.
Keeping it in there tight. Now his victims were all Japanese aircraft, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah, that is correct.
So everything he did. Now, I've also heard, when you have guns on the wings, like in a P-47, it's a little bit different. With the P-38, you're just pointing the nose and hosing where you're pointing it. So maybe that was a big advantage with that gun nose in the P-38.
I think 100% that it's it's concentrated fire is what you've got right there.
Amen to that. So there is a P-38 up in the EAA Museum in Oshkosh that is there to represent Major Bong and his accomplishments.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, he is a Medal of Honor winner for his exploits in the Pacific. So he fought pretty hard and earned himself a Medal of Honor.
And I know he was tragically lost in flying a plane test pilot not long after the war, flying, I think, was it a P-80?
Yes, one of the first American jets. He crashed in it.
Technology and upgrading and everything. So awful loss.
Right.
All right. Well, there's Richard Bong.
All right. Let's try what is it? Pierre Le Gloan from France shot down 18 aircraft, 4 German, 7 Italian, and 7 British aircraft. He was the 4th leading flying ace of the war, but that's what makes him interesting is he shot down German, Italian, and British aircraft. He changed sides. He started out, he ended up with the Vichy France, and so he switched sides, and so that's what makes him interesting. 18 aircraft, German, Italian, and British.
Goodness gracious! I'm surprised they made room for him. But Vichy France was the that was the German led after the fall of France. They led the government, and I suppose it beats going into a prisoner of war camp or something. But my goodness, I did not know that story about him. So, what were some of the aircraft that he shot down? Do you have that handy?
It just said German, Italian, and British. So I don't have that information. I would assume if it were British, it's probably Hurricanes. And if it's German, it's most likely BF-109s, or it could be some Stukas. I'll have to look it up and see what it was.
I'd like to find out a little bit more about him and the aircraft he was flying, but he had 18 kills for the French.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right.
On both sides. So all right, we'll go to Pierre Clostermann, also from France. He was their top ace. He had 33 victories. So he got quite a few more. 19 solo, 14 shared, and 5 probables, 8 more damaged. Here was interesting. He also claimed 225 motor vehicles destroyed, 72 locomotives, 5 tanks, and 2 E-boats, which are fast torpedo boats. So he was shooting anything that moved, it sounds like.
It definitely sounds like that. And so, what'd you say, 33 kills?
33 kills, correct.
There you go. All right.
And so, that's interesting. And, one more thing I forgot to mention. So back to the Soviet Union. I don't know if many people are aware of this, but the Soviets allowed women to fly in combat during World War II. So there are a couple of ladies who scored some pretty impressive numbers. Lydia Litvyak scored 12 victories, or again, here's another one, possibly 13 or 14 victories. She flew 66 combat sorties, and she was shot down near Orel during the Battle of Kursk, which was the big tank battle between the Soviets and the Germans, when she attacked a formation of German aircraft. So, incredibly brave, and she was shot down fighting for her country.
Wow. So I think, was she a night witch? I believe that was what that unit was called, I think, right?
Well, no, she was fighting during the day. That was the interesting thing, because I assumed it was one of the night witches, but she was a daylight. There were apparently 4 women together that were fighting in the same unit, and they were all daytime fighters, pilots. The second one is a Yekaterina Budanova, who got 11 kills. She shot down her first opponent was a BF-109 that she shared with Litvyak in the shoot down. And she just was, another one of these tough women that got out and flew and fight. and she was another one that was shot down and killed. But
all right, who's next?
Well, let's move on to the Axis. Mostly the Luftwaffe and a few of their satellite countries, but we'll start with Erich Hartmann, who was, again, we've been talking about 66 kills and, 33, 28. Erich Hartmann scored 352 kills.
Excuse me?
Yeah, exactly. He flew over 1,400 combat missions from 1942 to 1945. And of those 1,400 missions, 825 were combat missions. He was credited with shooting down a total of 352 Allied aircraft. There was 345 were Soviet, 7 American. So most of his kills were on the Eastern Front.
Yeah,
but this goes back to what we were talking about. The Axis fighters, those pilots basically flew the entirety of the war. They just flew until they survived or died. Whereas the Axis or the Allied pilots were on a rotation. They would rotate in, they would fly for a period of time or missions, and then they would rotate home and take that information back to train the next group of pilots. So the Axis had a different method of training their aircraft or their pilots.
No doubt. That's an incredible duration. And the fact, as you say, the fact that he even survived that long in combat conditions and everything else that goes along with it is an amazing testament to the man and, his machines as well.
Well, and here's the interesting note. He was never shot down by direct enemy action. He had to crash land his fighter 16 times with either mechanical failure or damage received from parts of an enemy aircraft he had shot down. So nobody ever shot him down. It was only mechanical or his own attack that took him down.
That's an incredible record. I'm sure one that he was proud of.
Oh, I'm sure.
Man.
So there were a total of 107 German pilots with more than 100 kills, and most of these were won against the Soviets on the Eastern Front. So the Luftwaffe, again, their pilots just flew until they couldn't fly anymore, but they scored a lot of kills.
That number is just almost impossible to believe. Wow.
Yeah, and that's never to be matched. I'm sure.
Well, you have to know that the Soviets were looking for him. They probably knew what his plane looked like because they saw it so much. But sometimes the people that saw it didn't make it back home to tell anybody what it looked like. But you had to be, there had to be a bounty on his head. Be the guy that shoots him down, takes him out. That stuff happens in wartime, and so he survived, drawing that kind of attention to himself, which is amazing.
Impressive, yes.
Yeah. All
right, we're going to talk about the highest scoring fighter ace against the Western Allies. So this would be on the Western Front, Europe. His name was Hans-Joachim Marseille with 158 kills. He was nicknamed the Star of Africa because all of his kills were early in the war. He's one of our aces that did not survive the war, which I'll cover here in a second. He flew against the British Commonwealth's Desert Air Force over North Africa, and he flew a desert, sort of a pink-colored Messerschmitt Bf-109. It wasn't pink, but it's that desert sand color.
Right.
And so here's one. On the 1st of September, 1942, during the course of 3 combat sorties, he claimed 17 enemy fighters shot down. Of the 17, he claimed 8 in 10 minutes.
That's just fish in a barrel. That's incredible. That's a shooting gallery.
Yeah, apparently an extremely good pilot, was apparently a playboy, liked to womanize and run around, was a bit of a disciplinary problem, but as a pilot, he was unbelievably good. Go to his demise. He was killed in a flying accident. Apparently, he took some damage to the engine. There was either a fire or an oil leak or something that was causing smoke, and he had to abandon his aircraft. And so he rolled it over and apparently went into a little bit of a dive. And when he exited the cockpit, he flew straight back into the vertical stabilizer, and it either killed him on impact with the vertical stabilizer or obviously incapacitated him because he couldn't open his parachute and he fell to his death. So he was one of those pilots that, and this was in, I think, 1942, maybe 43. So he was killed early in the war. He did not make it very far.
Again, you consider all the combat situations he was in with bullets flying, and as you mentioned, his plane was shot up. But you'd have a reasonable expectation that you could survive a bailout. And for whatever reason, alignment of himself and the aircraft and everything else. And like you say, perhaps that dive, did you say he rolled it over? So he was inverted as well. So maybe maybe a little disoriented as to, I mean, lots going on. Got to get out of that airplane. So
yeah, the cockpit was filled with smoke or oil or, something was, he had to get out of the aircraft. So his mind was busy trying to figure out how to get out.
Goodness. Now you mentioned he was flying the ME-109 in the desert. That particular plane, was that the one that had the big scoop on the side of the cowling that was like a tropical filter?
That's exactly correct. That keeps the sand and so forth out of the engine. So exactly, it's got the big scoop on the side.
Yeah.
Let's go to a night fighter ace, Heinz-Wolfgang Schnaufer. His nickname was the Spook of St. Trod, which was apparently a Belgium location. So his greatest one-night success and the second time he became an ace in a day was in February of 45 when he claimed 9 Lancaster heavy bombers in the course of one day. 2 were claimed in the early hours of the morning and 7 more in just 19 minutes that following evening. He had 121 kills total.
That's an incredible day, obviously. But you said Lancaster, and I mean, how many crew members were on a Lancaster? That's 8 to 10?
Yeah, it's 8 or 9, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a lot of people.
That's not mano a mano in that situation. That's a devastating for that squadron, for those families. My goodness. Now you said he was a night fighter, so the tactics, the plane he's flying, all those things were very different and specialized. Do you have a list of what he was flying?
Yes, BF 110 G-4/U8. So the twin engine Zerstreue, as the Germans called it.
Oh my!
It was not a very good aircraft in the daytime, but as a night fighter with some radar, and they actually fitted cannons in the back that would shoot upwards, so the plane could just fly under the bomber and fire up into it. It was very, very deadly. As a matter of fact, his aircraft was displayed after the war in London's Hyde Park, and it's a twin-tailed aircraft, and the one of the vertical stabilizers is in London in the Imperial War Museum, so you can actually see his aircraft with all the kill markings on the tail. It's in London today.
Goodness gracious.
Another one is Werner Mölders, who was the first pilot to claim more than 100 kills in the history of aerial warfare. He was also the man who developed the finger 4 formation for flight. So, he's a pretty well-known name.
It became a standard innovation for, spreading out your flight and making sure everybody's covered.
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, he fought in the Battle of France, Battle of Britain, Operation Barbarossa. So he had 101 victories by July of 1941.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I got to really hand it to you. You're doing a great job with all these difficult to pronounce names.
Very good.
Our friend Bruce Kawakami, Bruce Kawakami had some concerns about your ability to do that. And I just wanted to give you a big shout out there, Dave.
Well, thank you very much. Well, since we're speaking of some Japanese, let's talk about Tetsuo Iwamoto from Japan.
Attaboy.
He was the highest scoring Japanese fighter pilot who achieved 216 kills. Now, this is another gentleman. The Japanese apparently, at some point in the middle of the war, stopped crediting individual pilots with kills and gave the credit for the kill to their squadron or their unit. So some of the numbers on him are a bit mixed. I've got 216. Apparently, in his diary, he claimed 202, and officially there's an estimate of 80 to 87. So he's pretty wide in the gamut of how many he shot down, but he's basically assumed to be the highest number that we can prove.
Wow.
And he had a very long career as well. His first combat occurred in China in 1938. He flew Zeros off the aircraft carrier Zuikaku at the Battle of Coral Sea. He fought in Rabaul in New Britain, the Truk Atoll in the Carolines. He ended up in the Philippines. And after his fights in the Philippines, he went back to Japan for training of the kamikaze pilots.
Jeez.
So he had quite the career, and he actually decorated his plane with cherry blossom flowers. So, unlike the Americans who would put the Japanese flag or the Nazi symbol on their aircraft, he used cherry blossom flowers.
And what was that number that, and I know you said that it's a little unclear exactly.
216 is the high number, and 80 is the low number. So somewhere in between is the truth.
So he had some success against Chinese pilots, but also some American pilots and, British pilots, Australian pilots. Probably a pretty good international mix there that he was up against.
Exactly, because, he flew through the entire war. So he faced anybody and everybody.
Sure did. Goodness.
All right. Let's get a couple of the Finnish Air Force. Ilmari Juutilainen, which I'm sure that's not correct, but that's as good as I can get it. Finnish Air Force with 94 kills. He was the top scoring non-German fighter pilot of all time. He flew against the Soviets, and like I said, he himself claimed a total of 126 victories, but these are unconfirmed. 94 is the official number on 437 sorties. And this is a gentleman who was one of those people who had to fly what was available. It lists his aircraft as the Fokker D-21, the Brewster Buffalo, and the BF-109. And he got 34 of his victories while flying in the Buffalo. So again, he was not flying top of the line aircraft, but he was very capable in those aircraft.
Well, he was definitely a top of the line pilot with those kind of numbers. And again, the conditions in Finland during the war, not at all conducive to those kinds of numbers. So that was a pilot really stepping up and overcoming it and getting the most out of his machine.
And he got the most out of his wingman because he never lost a wingman in combat.
Man, very impressive.
All right, I've got two more here for us. Right. Constantine Catacuzino of the Romanian Air Force, 69 kills. He was, let's see, okay, he attacked a formation of 40 to 50 planes, IL-2s and yaks. He realized he couldn't destroy them all, but he thought he could inflict some damage on them. And so he dove in, shot down 2 of them before he was attacked, and managed to shoot down one of the yaks. So extremely brave and, 69 kills.
For the Romanian Air Force.
In Romania.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And again, he's fighting for the Axis, so he's up against the Soviets.
Did he say what he was flying? Was he flying the 109?
I believe he was, yes.
Yeah.
I believe that's what he was flying.
I think I've seen illustrations of Romanian 109s.
Yeah. I think he was apparently a very good aerobatic pilot as well. I think after the war, he flew aerobatics, if I remember the story correctly. And the last one I've got is Medo Dukovac of Croatia with 44 kills. He shot down 18 LAG-3s, 12 Aleutian IL-2s, 3 P-39s, 2 DB-3s, 2 Yak-1s, MiG-3, Spitfire, Yak-9, and an A-20 Havoc.
You kind of want to see the silhouettes painted on the side of on the rail outside his cockpit there. My gosh.
Yeah, I mean, he covered all of them. He flew 3 tours from 1941 to 1944 in the BF-109.
Wow.
And he these guys were good when they know what they're doing, they're good.
Well, and again, what all these pilots that we've profiled tonight have in common is, uncommon skill and ability, and a belief that, you stick to your tactics and you put yourself in a position. You don't overestimate your abilities. You get in there behind it if that's what you do, and you don't take chances. You give yourself room. You come out of the sun if you can. You leave yourself a route out if you have to. All of those things, and what a table of pilots that would have been to gather all these guys together after the war to hear them talk about what they did and how they did it.
Yeah, it's just the stories of these pilots are amazing. So just go back and read about any of them. They all led amazing, interesting lives. We probably will never see the numbers that the Luftwaffe pilots were putting up, but even today, I was reading that we actually have an ace that happened in 2024. There's a Captain Earl Ehrhart V of the U.S. Marine Corps, and he shot down 7 Houthi drones while flying a Harrier off the USS Bataan. So he's an ace on drones, and that was this year.
Okay, I'll accept that, but there may be some more qualification as times change and we adapt to what the definition is. Like we said at the top of the show, it's changed over time, and maybe we'll make room for that as well in our understanding and appreciation. But good job that 7 drones that did not further injure any Allied soldiers. So thank you for that service.
Absolutely. Yep. They're out there protecting us even today.
Definitely. And David Rowe, what do you got going on over at Aerophile?
Lots of editing. With the weather being bad, I have been uploading some videos to YouTube. I have working on some pictures to be put onto my website. So yeah, not a lot of picture taking, but a lot of picture editing.
Dave Gorman, you were gonna say something about the eclipse earlier, and somebody on this podcast rudely interrupted you.
Oh, you mean I got eclipsed?
You did. You got eclipsed.
I'll tell you what. I am excited about it. My school system here in Knox County Schools, we have printed off a bunch of eclipse glasses that we're going to provide all of our students. We have a half day, so. Although here in Knoxville, we're not going to get as much totality as we'd like. Well, if you don't have enough, then it's not totality. But, we're going to be able to dismiss early and see some of it. And we have proper and safe eyewear for everybody.
Good deal.
Yeah, so excited about that. Looking forward to hearing stories from the kids, and I'll give them some extra credit if are able to show me some video or pictures of them out there looking up at the eclipse. As David said, we sure hope we have some clear weather because it's not going to be much fun otherwise.
It's not. And the eclipse is a wonderful thing. I've actually been in the totality of it, and it's an amazing thing to see and hear and feel. The temperature changes. So if you can get to totality, do it. But otherwise, make sure you're using your glasses for safety's sake. You can hurt your eyes very badly. So don't just look at the sun. Wear your glasses and go out and enjoy it because it will be an amazing event regardless.
Absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to seeing your videos, Dave, of the eclipse as best as you can. I don't know. Are you traveling or are you staying home?
No, I'm probably have to stay home.
Yeah.
We've got some work, and I've got my Honor Air flight is next Wednesday, so I've got to get prepared for that. So probably we'll just stay home and then do my Honor Air flight later.
Well, and congratulations. That is a tremendous honor, and I know how excited you are about being able to accompany your dad on that flight, right?
Absolutely. I've got my father and two other veterans. We're about 130 or 40 veterans total going. It should be an outstanding day. We're going to be in D.C. at several of the monuments. We're going to go by the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and watch the changing of the guard. And I'm sure there's going to be some really impressive stories that these veterans will have to tell me about.
Well, I hope you remember to pack a camera.
Oh, he will.
Yeah,
that's high on my list. I've got to get some batteries charged.
First things first. Well, that's great, and we appreciate your dad for his service, and I know what an honor it will be for him, but also for you to be able to be there with him and have that experience with him. So congratulations on that.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
And Dave Gorman, you was mentioning last episode. We're coming up on episode 50. So
well, yeah. So I know we were talking a little bit about what we might do. Did we make a decision?
We have not. We're still standing by and waiting.
All right. So we're hoping to hear some things. I know I threw out a suggestion for a couple of things, but if you have something that you want to have us profile, hear us talk about, we'd love to talk about something you're interested in as well, folks. And we appreciate you listening and any feedback that you have for us.
Yeah, you can go to any of our social medias, which are all listed down below. And let us know who we want to do for episode 50. Appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had fun. Let's do it again.
See y'all soon.
For David Rowe, Dave Gorman, I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks for listening to History of Aviation Podcast.
This is Joe Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.